Alrighty, homework tutorial unit 6. Here we're going to be dealing with some working capital management problems. Let's jump into Excel. Okay, so not too much here, and we're going to do the ones that aren't highlighted yellow together, and then these ones are on your own, but I'm going to show you exactly how to do the procedures. So as per usual, probably getting used to this by now. So we're starting off with 17.2, page 421, and it says, compare the following two firms and decide which has more liquidity, explain why. So we've got some partial balance sheets here for firm 1 and firm 2, and we got to decide which one has more liquidity. So we want to focus on the concept of current assets. So first let's just start by adding up the current assets. What would that be? Cash. Let's do a sum here. Cash, inventory, and accounts receivable would be the current assets here. All current meaning liquid within a year, receivable within a year. So we'll do it for this company, and then it's going to be the same because it's the same cell range. We can copy and paste it here. It's the same cell range. All right, so firm 2 has more current assets, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's more liquid because we want to see what the ratio of cash to those other current assets is. So that's going to be the current ratio. Well, current ratio actually, the book's not asking for this, but I decided to be worthwhile. That's going to be the ratio of our current assets right here to our current liabilities. And current liabilities are going to be the sum, we have to do this separately, of our short-term liabilities, which would be accounts payable and notes payable. So that company's got a kind of a low current ratio there at 1.34, 1.35, and let's do the same thing for this business. 1.21. Well, that one's even lower. So firm 1, despite having fewer current assets, has a slightly higher current ratio, so they're looking more liquid actually. Let's do the quick ratio, which, as you'll remember, is the same as the current ratio, but we don't include inventory in the numerator of current assets. So this is going to be the sum of cash and accounts receivable divided by the sum of accounts payable and notes payable. Okay, 1.09, and copy and paste that for this company. The assets are, make sure the accounts are arranged in the same way, then the formula is going to transfer over. So, current ratio, quick ratio, higher for firm 1. We get a quick ratio below 1, you're kind of in trouble. You know, they only have $8,000 cash, and they've got 14,000 of short-term liabilities. It's a little dicey. They need to improve their cash management. I'm not too happy with firm 1's quick ratio, by the way. I think they should have a little bit more cash or work down those short-term liabilities, but at least it's north of 1, barely. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to say firm 1, given its higher current and quick ratios, despite the fact that it has less cash to begin with. Okay, so that was pretty easy, just doing a little analysis of liquidity and current assets there. Same thing happening here in problem 17.3. We get a little bit more structured balance sheet here, and the thing again is asking which of the two firms is more liquid and why. So you can do the same calculations I just did here. By the way, I added something just kind of fun in here, a balance sheet check to make sure our assets here, which is these accounts, equals our liabilities. And they do, so the idea is that we have a complete balance sheet here. I put a little if function in here that says if C7, which is the total assets, equals C12, spit out the word OK, and if it doesn't, it's going to spit out the word error. And then I further did some highlighting where if it's OK, it's going to be green, green light. And if it's wrong, so let me just intentionally make one of these values wrong. Here, assets equals 2,800, but liabilities is 2,900, and my formatting changed, my error kicked out for my if function. So I like to do little things like that in my worksheets to add a little visual there to check things. I actually work with a lot of different spreadsheets for different organizations, including my own personal finances. I'm my church's treasurer, so putting little algorithms to check, keep tabs on yourself is really helpful, and that's one useful thing that you can do in Excel. Fix that back to how it should be. All right, so we'll play with little things like that, just kind of as add-ins. Okay, 7.4, and in fact, 17.4, we're going to put that little check algorithm in here too. I just want you to get a handle for using stuff like that. 17.4 says, Captain Louis Renault's Hikewell Outdoor Equipment Company has the following balance sheet accounts as of the end of last year. 1/2 current assets are permanent and 1/2 are temporary. Okay, now the balance sheet balances, but I want to use my little algorithm, and all I need to do is copy it, my little if function, and paste it here. And then I just need to insert the proper cell references for the total of assets. It's now C10, and the total of liabilities, it's now F10. And indeed it balances. Notice if one of these were wrong, it would say error. Okay, so that's just a little fun, extra thing for fun to show you some capacities of Excel. Part A says, what is the amount of the company's current assets, its working capital? Well, okay, just the sum of cash, accounts receivable, and inventory. Sum of these three. By the way, if you're wondering what that little red flag is, it's just formula omits adjacent cells. No big deal. We only added a part of that range. Yeah, we know what we're doing, Excel. Thanks. Okay. Part B, what is the amount of the company's current liabilities? Same thing, we're just going to add up the current components of liabilities and equity here. So that's those two, accounts and notes payable. Net working capital then is part C. Oh, that's the difference, remember, between current assets and current liabilities. And if assets are greater than liabilities, we have net working capital. We do here. If current liabilities are greater than current assets, we don't have net working capital. We might need to consider getting more liquid and quickly. Okay, and then finally it says, what percentage of temporary current assets is financed by current liabilities? So first off, let's just review that we have the total of current assets. Now the problem said 1/2 of current assets are permanent, 1/2 are temporary. So percent of current assets temporary, let's do it like that. That equals half of our current assets. So 87,500 of our current assets are temporary. Okay, so when we think about the percent of temporary current assets that are financed by current liabilities, well, current liabilities is more than the total of temporary current assets. So that means we're financing all of that with current liabilities. So I'm just going to type that in. I don't need to do an equation. It's just 100%. So what type of approach would we be dealing with here? Aggressive, conservative, or moderate? Well, given that current liabilities are far greater than temporary current assets and almost the total of all current assets, this is going to be an aggressive approach. Okay, so 17.5 is basically the same problem, a little bit different data. We've altered the data. In fact, it says Alexander Sebastian, the finance manager of Hikewell Outdoor Equipment Company of the previous problem, thinks the way the company is financing its current assets is too risky, too aggressive of a working capital management approach. I agree. By the end of next year, he would like the pro forma balance sheet to look as follows. So we've made some adjustments, and what we've done is ratcheted down accounts and notes payable and ratcheted up long-term debt. So we've transferred some of our debt from short-term to long-term, which makes the rates more stable and the payment lower, so it's lower risk. So we're going to do the same thing, add up the current assets, current liabilities, net working capital, and then compare the temporary current assets, which is half of the current assets, to the amount of current liabilities and see if it's greater or less, and then decide what approach they're using. Right? And also I'd like you to see if you could copy and paste that balance sheet check algorithm right here, and then you just have to change the test on the if function for this cell, C10, equals this cell, F10. So see if you can set that one up and get the green light with the OK for here. 17.8, which says Tony Reynolds, CFO for Ridgeway Building Supplies, has determined that the company would run best if it used the moderate approach to financing. Now let's review that really quick. I'm just paging back in the book, and the moderate approach indicates that current liabilities is equal to temporary current assets, and then permanent current assets are going to be funded with long-term liabilities or equity. Okay, so moving on in the problem, it says recently the company has thought about switching to this approach, moderate approach. The following is a partial balance sheet stating its assets. Permanent current assets are assumed to be 60% of the current assets. Okay, and it says what would the company's financing look like if Tony switched to the moderate approach? Calculate for the following scenarios, A and B. And in A, we're going to have accounts payable of 40 grand, common equity of 200,000. So what does that leave us? The difference between 700,000 and 240,000 of 700,000 of assets. We've only accounted for 240,000 of them over here on the liabilities and equity side. So what does that leave? let's just make a little equation over here. Net equals 700 minus 240. 460,000 I have to divide between notes payable and long-term debt. Well, we also want to do this. Let me go ahead and find my current assets total, which is going to equal the sum of these three values here. So current assets are 225. We want to do the moderate approach, where all temporary current assets, so that was 60%, you remember, temporary current assets equals 60% of all the current assets, are financed by current liabilities. So we have to finance 135,000 temporary current assets with total current liabilities here. We've got 40,000 of that. So what does that leave for notes payable? It's going to be the total temporary current assets minus accounts payable. So the balance that's left for notes payable is 95,000. Okay, and now we have, if we want to double check that the sum of those 135,000 equals the sum of current assets. So we can check this over here just to be really safe. We can calculate current liabilities right here, which is the sum of these two. All right, so 135,000, 135,000. That's the moderate approach. Okay, these two values are equal. Temporary current assets and current liabilities. Okay, so we're complying with the moderate approach. Now we just need to see what's the net balance between assets and liabilities. It's 365,000, so we're going to have that much in long-term debt, and bada boom, there we go, my balance sheet balances, and everything matches like it should per the moderate approach. All right, I'll let you go ahead and wrap up or duplicate that problem in part B here, and make sure you get everything, the right values in here for the moderate approach, with the assumption that accounts payable is 30,000 and equity is 425,000. So that's a higher equity approach. They get some more investment from the company owners, and then divvy up what needs to go in notes payable and long-term debt, remembering that 60% of current assets, and that didn't change, so 60% of the 225, which is still going to be 135, is going to be composed of the sum of accounts payable and notes payable. And then the remainder of the liabilities plus equity has to be long-term debt, such that the balance sheet balances. Okay, so 17.9 is the same information from 17.8, and it says, what would Ridgeway Building Supplies financing look like if Tony decided to use an aggressive approach instead? And again, I'll walk us through the first part of this, and then you can finish up the second part on your own. Accounts payable is 180,000. Common equity is 200,000. Now, what does the aggressive working capital approach mean? It means that nearly all of our current assets, both temporary and permanent, are financed by current liabilities. And what's the exact percentage there? Well, the book doesn't really say. We could pick a number. Let's say 90%. I'm going to say 90% of, let me just write this down for us, aggressive working capital approach, 90% of current assets financed by current liabilities. So that'll be the benchmark we go for. So let's do this again. What are our total current assets? Equals sum cash, accounts receivable, and inventory. 225,000. Let's take the 90% of that of CA equals that amount times 0.9, 202,500. And that's going to be our sum of accounts and notes payable here. We'll do it like this. Sum, let's just write this, total current liabilities equals sum of these, and then we can just play around. We can work this. I need that to go to 200, so it's going to have to be 45,000. And there we go. Total current liabilities. Oh no, we want it to be equal to the 90%. So I want that value there equal to this value here. So I have to make this value smaller. So how much smaller? Let's try 35. I'm just going to do a guess and check. Less than that, 25. Close. Take off another 22,500. There we go. Now they match. Okay, so we're good. So that's given that accounts payable amount, that's all we can have in notes payable. And then the remainder here has to be long-term debt. So the net difference in our balance sheet. Oh, and I just realized I made a mistake. I had a circular reference in here. So let me just go ahead and calculate my net balance sheet difference, which is total assets minus total liabilities. And then I'll plug that value in, just the value. There we go. Right, so that's what the aggressive working capital structure is going to look like in that scenario, 17.9. Oh, and you know what? There's only a part A to that, so that one was a freebie. Meant for you to do that on your own, but that's okay. So go back and use that information to complete 17.8. Okay, moving right along, we're almost done here. 17.15 is asking us, it says, Milton Warden, the finance manager of Winhart Gift Company, is analyzing past data on the firm's fixed assets, permanent current assets, and temporary current assets for each month over the last 5 years. The company maintains level production, but its sales are seasonal. He found that the monthly level of the 3 types of assets over the last 5 years could be closely approximated by the following patterns in thousands of dollars. And what we're going to do is set those patterns up here based on some starting points that we have in here. And the book provides us a nice template for this. And this looks intimidating because there's a lot of things to enter, but we're just going to set up some simple formulas and have Excel, as usual, do really all the work for us. So don't be scared here. We'll get it. Okay, so first off, it says fixed assets remain constant at $39,000 each month over the last 5 years. That's indicated right there. And actually, let's go ahead. We can just record that by filling that value all the way down. So there we go. Fixed assets done. Permanent current assets were equal to 2 in January of year 1, so I'll start with that, and had grown by 0.16%. Grown 0.16 per month. Oh, 0.16, not 1.16%. 0.16. So what we want to do there is take this value. We want to do here is take the above value and then just add 0.16. And then if we fill that formula down, we'll see that it keeps adding 0.16, and then we can just fill that down all the way. Right, so we got this steady growth, and this is probably like representing the average increase in permanent current assets. Probably retained earnings in the cash account. Okay, so that's done. Temporary current assets followed the same pattern each year, starting at 0 in January. So we can enter that. Then each year increased by 1 monthly until July, and reduced by 1 monthly until they reach 0 again in January the next year. So how do we set that up? We'll start with that plus 1, and then we're only going to run that through July. And then in the subsequent period, I'm going to take the previous value and subtract 1 again. And I'm going to carry that all the way to December. Now, what I can do is copy that whole sequence. Copy and paste it again one more time. Okay, so that's the pattern we needed there for temporary current assets. Okay, so what are we going to do? A says plot these data on a graph similar to the one shown in figure 17.2. Now the nice thing about this template is the graph is set up for us here. All we have to do is fill the data in, and that's going to go right here. So for the graph right here, notice it says for graph, fixed assets plus permanent current assets. Well, where's my fixed assets? Right here. So that equals C23 plus permanent current assets right there. Bada boom. And then we can just fill that all the way down. Oh, I can't double click. I've got to drag because I'm not contiguous. There we go. So there's our growth in our fixed plus permanent current assets. And then total assets, of course, is going to equal the sum of all 3 of these. And then we can also fill that right down like that. Bada boom.
Bada bing, bada boom, right, Bart?
Okay, let's see if that filled the graph in. Hey, it did. Look at that beautiful graph with our steadily rising permanent current assets, our constant fixed assets, and then our up and down but upward trend in our temporary current assets. So that's exactly what we're looking for there. So that's A. So far, so good. B, calculate and identify on the graph the level of temporary current assets, permanent current assets, and fixed assets in 1, September of year 4. So basically, all we need to do there is say that, well, what does that equal? Equals, and then go back to the data part and find the value. And we just tag the value. The month of September of year 4. What am I looking for again? I'm looking for temporary current assets. Temporary current assets in September of year 4. That's column E, September of year 4, right there. August of year 5. Go back and find that value. August of year 5 is right there. Okay. Permanent current assets in September of year 4. Permanent current assets is in column D. September of year 4 is right there. And August of year 5 is column D. August of year 5 is right there. Okay. And then fixed assets. Well, that was 39 always, wasn't it? So I can just type that in. Okay. So there's B. Question C. Now calculate the levels of current liabilities in those months if the company followed 1. An aggressive working capital financing approach. Okay, so what would current liabilities be? If we're aggressive, we're financing all or more than all of our temporary current assets with current liabilities. So we don't know exactly how much, but we can write it in like this. It's going to be actually greater than 4. And here it's going to be greater than 5 because the value there was 5. Right? For a moderate working capital approach, well, it's going to be exactly equal to the temporary current assets. And for a conservative working capital approach, it's going to be less than, or let's pick a value 0.5, so it equals 0.5 times the temporary current assets for September of year 4, and let's say it equals 0.5 times the temporary current assets for August of year 5. So there you see the change in current liabilities based on the change in temporary current assets and whichever approach we're going to run. So 1716 is a very similar problem, and I will leave it to you to try to run that one on your own. There's maybe a little wrinkle in here. Let me give you a pointer. Okay, the fixed asset is going to be constant at 55, so you can enter that and fill. The permanent current assets equals 10 in January of year 1 and then grow by 0.3%. So we can do the same procedure there. Or not 3%, rather just grow by 0.3. So we add 0.3 and then we just keep filling that. So fill that all the way down, fill that value all the way down. And then we have an M, which is a factor that dictates the growth of temporary current assets. So M is just the month. So this is a monthly, kind of a progressive monthly factor. So that will go 1 to 12 for January to December. Probably the easiest way to do this would be to copy it and then just paste it, paste it, paste it, paste it. So we've got that 1 through 12 representing the month sequence, and then temporary current assets equals, it says equals M divided by M minus 1 over 4. So equals M divided by M minus 1. Notice I'm just substituting the actual value for M. M times M. Oh, whoops, I messed this up. M. Let's do a new bracket here. M. Let's see here. Temporary current assets then equals M times M minus 1. So the value of M now, M times M minus 1, is the cell reference divided by 4. So of course that's going to be 0. 1 times 1 minus 1 is 0. But when I fill that all the way down, we see that that's a trend that fluctuates each year just like that. Okay, so you add up the total assets, sum across, find the fixed plus permanent current assets, add the appropriate cells over here, fill everything down, and then it's going to fill in our graph for us, and you'll be able to address the questions just like we did in 1715.